Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Force Strategy Gaming. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Terran strategy. In this particular replay, our Terran player is Braddock and our Zerg opponent is Aristio. Let's go right into Braddock Vision. So yes, we're looking at a Terran strategy today. This is a little bit of a longer game. I know people have been requesting longer games. Something I think people should kind of realize is that the average game is in between 10 and 20 minutes. So my typical video length is between like 10 and 15 minutes or so. So that is pretty average. It is a typical game. But I do understand how people want to look at the longer games so that when they do get into those situations, they have a better idea of what to do. So we're going to be taking a look at a lot of the things that are necessary in longer games. A lot of the things that are going to help you perform well in the longer games. One of which is, of course, expanding. You know, when are you expanding? How are you expanding? Why are you expanding? Also going to be taking a look at harassment and how important harassment can be. In particular, in this video, you know, we're going to be opening up with a very, very standard opening against Zerg. A pretty standard opener as Terran against Zerg. For one is to not put this first depot here. No idea why he did that. But the other thing is that the standard opener is opening up with Hellions and then transitioning into Banshees. And so, you know, a lot of people get to that point, they do their damage, but then they say, now what? Well, your transitions are going to be dependent on, first of all, what's effective against whatever race you're playing, and then also what you're comfortable with and the type of build that you like, the type of build that you enjoy playing. In this particular video, again, we're opening up with that Hellion Banshee, and the transition that we're going to be looking to do is going to be moving into actually a Marine tank heavy build, and just with medevacs and constant dropping and harassment. Now, Marine tank is a very complementary mix of units. Tanks take care of a lot of those armor, those heavier units, as well as those units that group up in masses that we worry about with our Marines, such as those Zerglings, as well as the Banelings. So tanks take care of that, and the Marines take care of pretty much all else. Marines take care of Marines do a pretty good job of Banelings and Zerglings as well, but it's just a matter of proper micromanagement. But they really assist in taking out Mutalisks, and they do fairly decently against Hydralisks as well when upgraded and stim pack and all of that. So let's just start off by looking at this build order. Very, very basic. Started off with that 10 depot. Again, I would suggest putting that here. I mean, I suppose if you think about it, I mean, the reason he probably did this is because he's not worried about a 6 pool. This map is absolutely huge. It's very unlikely that that's going to come. Obviously, you can see the scouting here that it's not coming. He's got a heavy amount of drones, and that spawning pool isn't even up yet. But the other reason, too, is that, you know, the shorter time it takes him to build this, the more time he could have guys mining. So instead of running his guy all the way to the front right away, he wanted to drop that off. And basically, the purpose is just to get a little bit of extra resources. So I do know why he put it there, but I don't know. I suggest just walling off for your average player, at least. So we're going to be opening up with that 1-1-1 so for that Hellion into Banshee harassment. That opening build, again, is that 10 depot, 12 barracks, 13 refinery, 16 orbital command, and 19 factory. Pretty standard when you're looking at a 1-1-1 build. It's going to be a very delayed second refinery because we're going to be spending resources on that early Hellion. That's the reason we're not getting that second refinery quite yet. And then keep in mind, again, that transition that we're planning to do in this game is into Marine tank. Since we're going to be going somewhat Marine heavy, we're also going to need those extra resources for additional barracks. And we're going to be seeing a pretty quick expansion on this game as well. The purpose being, the reason being that we're going to be going for this expansion is that we do see that our opponent expanded here. With that in mind, we feel fairly safe to expand ourselves. You can be reasonably sure that your opponent's not going to be too aggressive. So, you know, you're going with a build, you do your standard build, we get this 1-1-1 out, we get the barracks, the factory, the starport. We continue what we plan on doing. We continue with the Hellion coming out, we continue with getting the Banshee once that's available, but also adding onto that, we're going to be getting this expansion because we saw that expansion from our opponent, and that's kind of that has to be your thought process. The other thing to consider as well is that you kind of have to realize that you really have two options when your opponent expands. You either need to attack them and try to do a significant amount of damage and possibly even take out their expansion, or you need to expand yourself. If you don't do one of those two things, you're going to fall pretty far behind your opponent. It's basic math. You know, they've got another base, they've got so much more mining than you, they're going to have that much more resources, and they're going to be able to make that many more units. So you have to do something. You have to respond somehow. You can't see this and not expand and not attack. If you do those two things, you're just gonna lose the game. It doesn't matter what fanciness you try to pull out. Something needs to happen. So Continuing with the build order here, we went up to the factory last, which was at 19 supply. Then at 27 is when we saw the Starport go down. 30 is when this command center started building. Remember, we built this in response to our opponent. And then 32 is when we got that second refinery here. Now we're going to be dropping these 2 additional barracks, and I know something I've discussed before is what you can afford on one base. Normally you cannot afford 3 barracks, a factory, and a Starport on one base, but since this is just about finished, that's why we're building these right here. So this is probably going to be changing into an Orbital Command, which it is, and then we're going to be lifting it off and putting it right here. So once these are up, this should be right over here, and we're going to get it saturated by pulling some workers over, and then we're easily going to be able to afford all of these buildings. In fact, we're probably going to see another building go down as well later, but not quite yet, because we still want to keep producing out of these. We want to be able to start producing out of these as soon as possible. You see those Marines coming out. And here's something to pay attention to. Look, see all these bars right here? These are all building stuff. That's something you really want to be in the position of doing. You really want to make sure that you're always producing stuff out of all of your buildings. You build these buildings to use them, so do that. That's the purpose. That's the reason they're here. You want to make sure you're using those buildings, taking full advantage of them. So far we haven't really done much. We saw that expansion, we did some scouting. We don't see a lot coming. I would suggest trying to grab these towers. It's going to be hard with Marines when speedlings are on the board, so maybe just bringing down the Hellions to grab at least one of these 2 towers so you can see any sort of a push coming. Always a good idea to have that forward scouting. You can see that transfer that just took place, bringing that Orbital Command down over here. So at this point, we're just kind of working on our macro game. We're getting upgrades, right? We're going to be seeing this engineering bay come down to get us upgrades. We're making sure production is constant. Doing that little switch there, so it looks like we're going to be moving into either siege tanks or Thors at this point. I'm assuming this is going to be the move to siege tanks. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And then just keeping our cool. Our opponent really hasn't done much. We want to make sure we have eyes on our opponent at least. Again, grabbing these El Naga towers, great idea. At this point, moving this Banshee over here to check for a 3rd expansion and then move into a Harass. That's the purpose. That's why we're seeing this Banshee over here. That's something else to keep in mind. You have to realize that Zerg, a lot of times, a lot of Zerg players like to expand aggressively. So make sure you check for that. If we saw something building here, we would attack it. We would deny it. He's not going to be able to defend it. He's so far away from his main. You should easily be able to take it out before he manages to go over and help defend it. So here we're looking at mobility. This is that transition I was talking about. We opened up with Hellions and Banshees. We didn't end up doing as much harassment. Part of the reason is because this map is so huge, it's kind of hard to open up with that Hellion harassment, and we saw that spine crawler there, that kind of prevented that from happening as well. But once we get things up and rolling, coming out with these medevacs, dropping, and this is what we're going to be seeing for the majority of the rest of the game. We're just going to be seeing harassment and dropping constantly. And the goal, remember, is to try to hurt their economy. Obviously, you need to target fire any offensive units that are attacking you when you do push out. You need to kill those first, otherwise you're just going to lose your units. But once you get rid of all threats, your main goal is to hit that economy. This is an economy game. It's economy focused. You really have to concentrate. If you can do damage to your opponent's economy, then you're in a really good spot. All the meanwhile, while that attack was going on, because we have these hotkeys, we're able to continue producing, and you can see he was doing that. He has this small task force here because he was producing while dropping. And that's something else to realize, how important hotkeys are. You're attacking right here, yada yada yada. Hit your hotkeys. For Braddock here, it's 1 and 2 for his factory and Starport. He's hitting 1 and 2, and he's building units all while he's attacking his opponent. Now over here, coming out with a Mutalisk push, because we have Marines, we feel pretty safe. Now you have to worry about that mobility. You see how easily he's able to move back. So strategically placed turrets, great idea. If you're expanded and you know your forces have to be in between, put turrets in a place where if he tried to basically circumvent your units, you would be still fairly well defended. A turret here, great positioning. It's going to allow him to keep his forces down right over here and still feel pretty safe. Moving out at this point, this is what I was talking about. We're going to be seeing this continued harassment. So we opened up with the Hellion and the Banshee. Now, as we saw in this game, Braddock didn't take full advantage of that, and part of the reason is because this map is so huge, it's kind of hard for him to properly do that. And that spine crawler prevented that Hellion harass. It's basically the sole spine crawler plus the queens that were likely back here prevented all of that Hellion harass that we could have seen. Would have liked to see some harassment with the Banshees, but while I wasn't following it around because we were talking about other things, Braddock did use the Banshees to go around and pick off random Zerglings that were placed throughout the map. That's not a bad use. If you don't happen to go straight to his base, just try to do something with that unit. If you make that Banshee for that early game, try to pick off Zerglings or whatever. Anything that you kill is going to add up towards paying towards the cost of that unit and make it effective. So lifting off some guys here, we're going to be seeing multi-pronged attacks in this game as well. This is something that can be very effective. Hitting at the front and then dropping in the back, very, very effective tactic, something I suggest doing. Here we're seeing additional expansion going down, coming up with these upgrades as well, keeping that production constant. These are all very important things. So here we go, drop coming in the back while we're engaging his units in the front. He's paying attention here, and then he's like, oh crap, back in my base, there are Marines and a medevac. And what you want to do is you want to do damage. If a threat comes like this, you take it out, but if these ground forces, the banelings just lift off, walk away. Now obviously a danger would be if he moved in the banelings and roaches at the same time as the mutalisk, then you're probably going to lose your forces, but that's why we have these two-pronged attacks. If one of them doesn't work, well, we can fall back on the other one. So this one's starting to fail, moving back in with these Marines, dropping them. This can be very effective. Something to realize, obviously, in order to do something like this, multi-pronged attacks, you're going to have good micro. And you're going to have to be quick. You're going to have a pretty high APM because moving back and forth between these two things pretty much requires it. But with hotkeys, you can easily do this. It's a very effective tactic as long as you can manage to do it. And all the while, you know, we're dropping or attacking from two angles. Going to go back, going to reiterate once again. Look at this. See those blue bars? Production is constant. Production is constant. Very important. Also getting those upgrades. Don't see the need for Thors at the moment, but you know, we did get that level 1 upgrade, so that's going to help our siege tanks quite a bit. You're only really going to need to think about getting a Thors if he starts to mass up Mutalisk and you're worried that those Marines aren't going to be enough. But at the moment, we haven't seen too heavy a force of Mutalisk, so right now, look at this force. Pretty big, pretty strong. Let's just lift off our guys and walk away. We picked off what we could, and look at that. We didn't lose a single Marine. Both medevacs are still completely full there. So very good. If you have the micro to do it, it's a really good tactic. Hit at the front, drop in the back. Hit at the front, drop in the back. You see expansions, bring a medevac or two full of units. That's what we have to worry about right there. Sniping Mutalisk forces. We did end up losing one full thing of Marines, which is pretty devastating, but if you just keep an eye out and try to avoid that happening, this will be very effective. So grabbing this medevac, we're going to be putting him in the back and rallying him over here, and then we're planning on hitting in the front. That's the whole plan. All the while, check out that production tab. It's taking up like half my screen. Units coming out, additional barracks. So we were on 2 bases. We were looking at this. Now we've got that 3rd base up. It's starting to get saturated. More buildings are coming down, so that's something else to consider. You know, you need to make sure you produce more, you build more production buildings when you expand. It's pretty vital. It's important. I mean, it makes sense. You know, off of 1 base you can afford so much. If you have 2 bases, you can afford a little more. You have 3, you can afford a little more. That's how you should kind of play the game. And if you may be wondering, well, you didn't really mention this expansion, when did it go down? This expansion went down when we saw that 3rd expansion. Again, the thought process that when our opponent expands, we either need to attack or expand. We saw this expansion, we started building an expansion, there we go. We're on even footing, we don't have to worry about falling behind in economy, and we should be able to keep up with his army size. So threat like this kind of have to worry about, especially because we didn't have our siege tank set up. If we had our siege tank set up there, it would have been a little bit different. And you're going to want to make sure you drop these pretty soon as well, because we do have to worry about this Mutalisk coming. So get those Marines down there to fend off any Mutalisk. Using the high ground, not a bad idea. You know, not a lot of players. I don't see a lot of players doing this, especially in the lower leagues. Even in Diamond, I don't see a lot of players doing that. So try and take advantage of the high ground for stuff like this. As long as you have anti-air defense, it's not a bad idea. Moving in with banelings, try to avoid stuff like that happening. Obviously, Braddock wasn't fully paying attention here. He could have easily microed those SCVs away. He was probably paying attention to one of the 18 other things he was doing, the drop over here, drop over here. So yeah, very effective. You know, just continue. All the while, we're doing this harassment. We're dropping in multiple angles. All the while, again, for like the 13th time, production is constant. Upgrades are coming. These are all things you can be doing. As soon as we get another expansion up, we would want to drop down more buildings as well. Pushing forward here. This might not do so well. Actually, no, there's Marines, and this just shows you how effective. You know, he's got a fairly decent size Mutalisk there, but Marines do very, very well, especially coupled with these medevacs. Marines do very, very well against Mutalisk. They're upgraded. They've got Stimpack. They've got Combat Shield. They've got the 3-level upgrades for their weapons there. None of the armor upgrades, which I would like to see, but you know, whatever. I mean, he has the resources to do it. He just didn't drop down that 2nd engineering bay, I don't think. I think, yeah, he just has that one. So yeah, that's the end of this game. We looked at some very good stuff, some very interesting stuff. I'll go over kind of the big broad basics. We looked at multi-pronged attacks. We opened up with that Hellion into Banshee, and then that transition to Marine Tank came. That alone right there is something to realize can be pretty effective against Zerg. But just getting the units isn't the important part, it's how you use them. We saw by getting those medevacs and using the Marine Tank combo and dropping from multiple locations, harassing from multiple locations, we saw how effective that can be. In fact, the reason Aristio did call a good game here, I hadn't gone to it, but we were watching that push at the front. We were talking about that push at the front, and at the very same time, there was this drop going on at his third. And just this one drop with these 8 Marines here managed to take out that expansion. Because all of his units were focused on what we were attacking with at the front, he wasn't able to defend against it, and he called a good game. Because if you take out an expansion, and your opponent knows that you have at least 1 extra base than them, and actually we have 2 extra bases than he does, he knew at that point that he was too far behind and he lost the game. So let's just go ahead and look at this build order, just the opening part for you guys. We started off with that 10 depot, followed that up with a 12 barracks and 13 refinery. 16 commands, saw that 16 supply. Why do I keep, this is like the 3rd video that I've said that. 16 supply, we saw that Orbital Command. 19 supply coming down with that refinery. 27 supply was our Starport. 30 supply, that expansion. Remember, we got that expansion because we saw that our opponent had expanded, and we weren't able to get in there with Hellions to do damage, so basically we had to expand at that point unless we were going to do lots of damage with that Banshee. And then a 34 supply, once that expansion was just about finished building, we went ahead and dropped down these additional barracks. And again, the important thing that we looked at was that transition from Hellion Banshee into Marine Tank with medevacs, doing dropping, hitting from multiple angles, 2-pronged attacks, how effective that can be. And then also the idea of expanding when your opponent expands, and whenever you do that, coming down with additional production buildings. So once again, guys, this has been Force from Force Strategy Gaming. If you guys like our videos and you like what we're doing here, please do subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. Might be you're thinking, well, what if he did go for Void Rays? Wouldn't you be screwed? Something else to realize is he's not very likely to go for Void Rays because we hit his opponent so hard early in the game. He's likely to build a lot of early defenses for fear of a secondary attack. And if he doesn't build early defenses, if we didn't see a lot of Stalkers on the board, we would have hit before this point, and we would have taken him out as he was teching up to Void Rays. So